The clicker in the sleepy village of Gable Hollow, nestled between ancient woods and a forgotten cemetery. Whispers of a chilling legend floated on the breeze. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about the ghost known as the clicker. This phantom, missing the lower half of its body, was said to move with unnerving speed on its hands, the sound of its nails clicking on asphalt echoing through the night. The story begins with Emily, a young woman who had recently moved to Gable Hollow. She was fascinated by the village's history and had a particular interest in its local legends. One evening, while researching in the village library, she stumbled upon an old newspaper article from 1932. It detailed the tragic death of a young woman named Margaret who had been found at the edge of the woods, her lower body severed in a grisly accident. Intrigued, Emily dug deeper. She learned that Margaret had been an outcast, accused of witchcraft by the superstitious villagers. The night she died, a mob had chased her into the woods, where she met her gruesome fate. The article mentioned that ever since her death, there had been reports of a ghostly figure dragging itself through the village, the sound of its nails clicking ominously. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily decided to visit the site of Margaret's death. She arrived at dusk, the sky a canvas of purples and oranges. The air was thick with the scent of pine and decay. As she walked deeper into the woods, she felt an eerie presence, as if unseen eyes were watching her every move. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and a dense fog rolled in, enveloping Emily in a shroud of cold. She heard it then, the unmistakable sound of nails clicking on the asphalt. Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned towards the noise. Emerging from the fog, she saw the spectral form of the clicker, its upper body twisted and contorted, dragging itself with terrifying speed. Emily froze, paralyzed by fear. The clicker's hollow eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, time stood still. Then, with a blood-curdling scream, it lunged towards her. Emily turned and ran, the clicking sound growing louder, closer, more frantic. She stumbled and fell, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Just as the clicker was about to reach her, Emily remembered the old tales of spirits bound by unfinished business. Desperate, she called out, "Margaret, what do you want? How can I help you?" The clicker stopped abruptly, its eyes burning with a mixture of rage and sorrow. It pointed a skeletal finger towards the village, where the descendants of those who had wronged her still lived. Emily understood the spirit sought justice, or perhaps vengeance. With renewed determination, Emily vowed to bring Margaret's story to light and seek justice for her unjust death. She fled the woods, the clicker's presence lingering at the edge of her consciousness, a constant reminder of her promise. Days turned into weeks as Emily researched and shared Margaret's story with the villagers. Slowly, the truth spread, and the village elders, guilt-ridden, held a ceremony to apologize for the wrongs committed against Margaret. They erected a memorial in her honor at the edge of the woods. One night, as Emily stood by the memorial, she heard the familiar clicking sound. The clicker appeared once more, but this time, its eyes seemed less tormented. With a final, grateful glance, the spirit of Margaret faded into the night, leaving behind only the faintest echo of clicking nails. Emily sighed in relief, thinking the haunting had ended. But as she turned to leave, she noticed something chilling, a new set of drag marks on the asphalt, leading deeper into the woods. The legend of the clicker was far from over, and a new mystery awaited those brave enough to uncover it. The clicker returns. Months passed, and life in Gable Hollow began to return to normal. The villagers, now aware of the tragic history that had birthed the clicker, felt a collective sense of relief. Emily, too, believed she had helped put Margaret's spirit to rest. She resumed her studies, the eerie events of the past fading into the background of her mind. One stormy night, as the wind howled and rain lashed against her window, Emily received a frantic phone call from Sarah, a friend who lived on the outskirts of the village. "Emily, you need to come quickly," Sarah's voice trembled. "There's something in the woods." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Grabbing her flashlight and raincoat, she hurried to Sarah's house. The rain made the journey difficult, and the storm's fury seemed to grow with each step. When she arrived, Sarah stood at the edge of the forest, pale and shaking. "It's back," Sarah whispered. "The clicker. I heard it." Emily's blood ran cold. "Show me?" They ventured into the woods, the beam of Emily's flashlight cutting through the darkness. The storm had turned the forest floor into a muddy quagmire, but the two women pressed on. As they approached the spot where the memorial stood, Emily's flashlight flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. Suddenly, the familiar sound of nails clicking on asphalt echoed through the trees. Emily and Sarah exchanged terrified glances. The clicker emerged from the shadows, its hollow eyes fixated on them. But this time, something was different. The ghost's movements were more frantic, its nails clicking faster, more erratically. "Margaret, what do you want?" Emily called out, her voice barely audible over the storm. The clicker stopped, pointing towards a darkened path that led deeper into the woods, one Emily had never explored. Reluctantly, she and Sarah followed the ghost's lead, the sound of clicking guiding them. They reached an old, dilapidated cabin hidden among the trees. The door hung askew, and the windows were shattered. As they stepped inside, the musty smell of decay filled their nostrils. The interior was a chaotic mess of broken furniture and rotting wood. In the center of the room, an old trunk lay open, its contents spilling out. Emily picked up a faded photograph from the trunk. It showed Margaret, but she wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, his face obscured by shadow. As Emily examined the photo, she felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She turned to see the clicker, its eyes filled with desperation and urgency. "Who is he?" Emily asked, holding up the photograph. The clicker pointed towards the back of the cabin, where a hidden door lay partially concealed beneath a rug. Emily and Sarah moved the rug aside and opened the door, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. With trembling hands, Emily led the way, her flashlight illuminating the dank, narrow passage. At the bottom, they found a small, hidden room. The walls were covered in old newspaper clippings and photographs, all depicting Margaret and the same mysterious man. In the center of the room was a table with a journal on it. Emily opened the journal and began to read. It detailed Margaret's life and her secret relationship with the man in the photos, who was revealed to be the son of the village's most prominent family. Their love was forbidden, and when the villagers discovered their affair, they turned on Margaret, leading to the tragic events that followed. As Emily read the final entry, a chilling realization dawned on her. The man had survived the mob's attack and had vowed to protect Margaret's spirit, even in death. The clicker was not just Margaret, but a manifestation of both their spirits bound together by their tragic love. The clicking grew louder, more frantic, as Emily and Sarah turned to leave the hidden room. They understood now the spirits were not at rest. They needed to be reunited, their story told in full. The storm raged on as Emily and Sarah made their way back to the village, carrying the journal and the photograph. They knew they had to reveal the truth about Margaret and her lover to finally lay their spirits to rest. But as they reached the village, the clicking sound followed them, relentless and unyielding. The legend of the clicker had only deepened, and Emily realized that their journey was far from over. The spirits of Margaret and her lover demanded justice, and the dark secrets of Gable Hollow were about to be uncovered, one chilling revelation at a time. The clicker's legacy. The following days were a blur of revelations and confrontations. Emily and Sarah presented the journal and photograph to the village council, revealing the true story of Margaret and her forbidden love. The council members were shocked, their faces pale as they realized the depth of the injustice that had been done. A town meeting was called, and villagers gathered in the square, braving the rain that still poured down in unrelenting sheets. Emily stood before them, holding the journal aloft. She recounted Margaret's story, her voice carrying over the murmur of the crowd. "We owe it to Margaret and her lover to remember their story, to acknowledge the wrongs committed against them," Emily declared. "Only then can their spirits find peace." The villagers, their guilt and sorrow palpable, agreed to hold a proper memorial for Margaret and her lover. They decided to place it at the heart of the village, where all could see and remember. As preparations began, Emily and Sarah returned to the cabin to retrieve any other items that might aid in telling the full story. While searching the hidden room again, Emily discovered a second, even older journal hidden beneath loose floorboards. This journal belonged to the man in the photographs. As she read through it, a new layer of the mystery unfolded. It revealed that the man's family had dabbled in dark rituals and occult practices, which were the true cause of the village's fear and superstition. Emily's breath caught as she read the final entries. The man had written about a ritual to bind his spirit to Margaret's, ensuring they would never be separated, even in death. The ritual involved a blood pact, and the man had performed it the night before the mob came for Margaret. This explained the relentless nature of the clicker. It was not just a haunting, but a love bound by dark magic. As the memorial ceremony approached, Emily and Sarah shared this new information with the village council. The council decided to include this part of the story in the memorial, acknowledging both the love and the dark practices that had intertwined the fates of Margaret and her lover. The night of the memorial, the villagers gathered once more, this time in the heart of Gable Hollow. A statue of Margaret and her lover, entwined in a final embrace, was unveiled. Emily stood before the crowd, recounting the story one last time. As she spoke, a sense of peace seemed to settle over the village. But as the ceremony drew to a close, Emily noticed something strange. The rain, which had been a constant presence for days, suddenly stopped. The air grew still, and a chilling silence fell over the crowd. Emily's eyes widened as she saw a figure standing at the edge of the village square, the clicker. The ghostly figure watched, its eyes filled with an unsettling mixture of sorrow and gratitude. Emily stepped forward, feeling an invisible force guiding her. She approached the clicker, her heart pounding. "Margaret, we've told your story," Emily whispered. "You and your lover can rest now." The clicker extended a skeletal hand, and for a moment, Emily hesitated. Then she took the hand, feeling a cold, otherworldly energy course through her. The ghost's eyes bore into hers, and she felt an overwhelming wave of emotion, love, pain, and a deep, eternal bond. The clicker began to fade, its form dissolving into the night. The clicking sound grew faint, then vanished entirely. Emily let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, her heart heavy yet relieved. The villagers, too, felt the shift. They began to disperse, whispering amongst themselves about the strange and haunting events. As Emily and Sarah walked back to their homes, they couldn't shake the feeling that something remained unresolved. That night, Emily dreamed of the cabin. She saw Margaret and her lover, their spirits bound by the ritual, unable to fully move on. In the dream, the man whispered a single word: "Finish." Emily awoke with a start, her mind racing. She realized that while they had told the story and honored the spirits, the dark ritual that bound them still lingered. To truly free Margaret and her lover, they would need to perform a counter-ritual, one that could break the bond and allow them to rest in peace. Determined, Emily and Sarah began researching ancient rituals and counter-spells, knowing that their journey was far from over. The legend of the clicker had only deepened, and the final chapter of this haunting tale was yet to be written. In the depths of Gable Hollow, a new mystery awaited, one that would test their courage and resolve like never before. The clicker's vengeance. Emily and Sarah threw themselves into their research, combing through ancient texts and consulting with experts in the occult. Days turned into sleepless nights as they worked tirelessly to find a way to break the bond and release Margaret and her lover from their eternal torment. The villagers, still shaken by recent events, began to grow restless, their initial support waning as fear crept back into their hearts. Finally, Emily found a ritual in a dusty old tome that seemed promising. It required a combination of specific herbs, a sacred incantation, and the blood of a willing participant to symbolize the breaking of the original blood pact. Determined to see it through, Emily and Sarah gathered the necessary ingredients and prepared to perform the ritual at the cabin where the dark bond had been forged. On the night of the ritual, the moon hung low and full in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the village. Emily and Sarah made their way to the cabin, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. They set up the ritual in the hidden room, drawing a circle with the herbs and lighting candles around the perimeter. Emily took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she held the ceremonial dagger. "Are you ready?" she asked Sarah, who nodded, her face pale but resolute. With a steady hand, Emily made a small cut on her palm, allowing her blood to drip into a bowl at the center of the circle. She began to chant the incantation, her voice growing stronger with each word. The air grew thick with tension, and a chill swept through the room. As the final words left her lips, the candles flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. A cold, malevolent presence filled the room, and the sound of nails clicking on asphalt echoed from all directions. The clicker appeared, its eyes burning with an unholy light. For a moment, Emily thought the ritual was working. The clicker seemed to waver, its form flickering like a dying flame. But then, the ghost let out a blood-curdling scream, and the room was filled with a violent gust of wind. The candles reignited, casting a ghastly light on the horror that unfolded before them. The clicker lunged at Emily, its skeletal hands wrapping around her throat. She struggled to breathe, her vision blurring as she clawed at the ghostly fingers. Sarah screamed and tried to intervene, but the ghost flung her across the room with supernatural strength. Emily's mind raced as she fought for her life. She realized with a sickening dread that they had made a terrible mistake. The ritual was not meant to break the bond but to strengthen it. They had unwittingly empowered the clicker, binding it to the earthly realm with even greater fury. With a final, desperate effort, Emily reached for the ceremonial dagger. She plunged it into the ghost's form, but it passed through harmlessly, leaving her defenseless. The clicker's grip tightened, and Emily's world went dark. When she awoke, she was lying on the cold, hard floor of the cabin. The candles were extinguished, and Sarah lay unconscious beside her. Emily tried to move, but her body felt heavy and unresponsive. A horrific realization dawned on her. She couldn't feel her legs. Panic surged through her as she looked down and saw that her lower body was gone, severed at the waist. The clicking sound returned, now louder and more menacing. Emily's vision swam as she saw the spectral form of the clicker, now possessing her lower half, moving with terrifying speed. The ghost leaned close, its hollow eyes staring into hers. "Now, you are one of us," it whispered, its voice a chilling echo. Emily's screams filled the cabin, but no one in the village could hear her. Sarah regained consciousness and fled the cabin, her mind shattered by the horror she had witnessed. She tried to warn the villagers, but her words were incoherent, and they dismissed her as mad. As the days passed, more villagers began to hear the ominous clicking sound at night, growing closer and closer. Emily's fate was sealed, her spirit bound to the cursed woods alongside Margaret and her lover. The village of Gable Hollow fell into despair, haunted by the relentless presence of the clicker. The story of Margaret's tragic love and the dark rituals that bound them became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the perils of tampering with forces beyond comprehension. The clicker's legacy of vengeance lived on, an eternal nightmare for those who dared to uncover the secrets of the past, and in the stillness of the night, the sound of nails clicking on asphalt echoed through the village, a chilling reminder that some spirits can never be laid to rest.